Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'd like to give you my yearly update on my jade plant, and this year I think it's looking the best this plant has ever looked, so I'm really happy with how it's doing at the moment. So I'll give you guys an update of how it's done over the last year. Normally when I do these updates it's normally towards the end of summer, because then it's had the whole growing season to grow and look at its best. This year I'm starting it a little bit earlier. I'm starting it in the middle of July. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is it's looking a lot better at this time of year than it normally does. And two, I've got a couple of other plants I'd like to show you and do some pruning on as well. So I've been treating this a little bit differently the last year, and that's why I think it's looking quite so good this year. We had a phenomenal October. It was really dry, really warm for Scotland anyway, temperatures in the high teens and not too cold at night. We didn't have too much frost, but it was really dry and really sunny. So I had this outside for 2 or 3 weeks to get the most of that late autumn sunshine. The reason I did that was because normally I have this indoors in the conservatory where it gets really hot, and it really does enjoy the hot temperatures there in the conservatory. But once you pass the autumn equinox and days start getting shorter in September, the sun moves around, and because it's a northwest facing conservatory, it doesn't get much sun for 6 months of the year. So I moved it to the front of the house where it's much sunnier, and it seemed to really enjoy that time outside that it had. Then I took it inside to the conservatory for a few weeks, but then we had our first cold snap, and this started to get a little bit of cold stress. I normally keep this in the conservatory the whole winter and only take it out occasionally if it gets really cold, but it does quite often get down to 5 degrees in my conservatory, which is too cold for jade plants if it's a prolonged cold exposure. A few hours at 5 degrees shouldn't be a major issue, but if it's for a few days, then it can be a problem. So I moved this into a windowsill in my house. Unfortunately, the only windowsill I have that's wide enough for this plant is a north-facing windowsill, so it was very low light levels. So I just basically kept it in a dormant state. I didn't really water it much at all. I think I watered this probably about once a month, and just a tiny bit of water at that. The reason I like to keep it completely dormant is because I have such dark winters here. If it tries to grow, it's going to get very leggy growth. So I try and stop it from growing at all by keeping it really dry. The other reason it's good to keep it dry is this goes for a wet season, a dry season in the wild. In the winter time, it is the dry season normally for the jade plants. And if they get watered in the dry season and they're going into dormancy, they'll quite often just have root rot problems, and then you could lose the whole plant through rot. So that's another reason I like to keep it nice and dry. But anyway, it went through the winter, much better survival than normal. It did lose a few leaves. It always loses a few leaves in winter because the light levels are lower and it's the cooler temperatures and it's in a dormant phase. But then going into spring, it was doing a lot better than it has in previous winters because they kept it that bit warmer inside the house. And then come springtime, it was back in the conservatory, enjoying the high temperatures that the conservatory has. And whenever there's been a warm spell, I've taken it outside to be outside in the garden. Now, luckily, we've had one of the hottest, driest summers on record, so this has been outside for several weeks, probably about a month or two in total, and that extra light has really helped it out. You can see now it's got really thick, lush growth. It's got a lovely green colour. You can also tell it has some high light exposure because the tips, the leaf margins, are a red colour. You often get a little red line appearing on the margins if the light levels are really high. Also, you can notice it's got really dark foliage now, really dark, healthy green colour. I have been giving it a high nitrogen feed as well, just to encourage lots of leaf production and larger leaves as well. And that's probably why it's got such a dark colour to its leaves now. They're nice and plump as well. And it does actually take a lot of water at the moment. So jade plants, most people think of them as succulents, so they won't need much water. But in the wild where they come from, they do get regular rainfall in the summer. And they really need the succulent leaf to survive the cold winter months when there's very little rain at all for them. So they don't mind quite a lot of water in the summer as long as you let the soil dry out completely in between waterings. So it really depends on how sunny a location your plant is in and how big the pot is compared with the size of the plant. But for mine, for example, if it's a really hot day, I can be watering this every single day. I'll water it in the evening, and I come back the next evening and it's bone dry already. So I water it every day if it's a really hot spell. Especially now it's outside and it's getting that airflow, it does seem to dry out faster. So if your jade plant's really thirsty, by all means water it regularly, but make sure it fully dries out in between waterings. So that's how it's looking at the moment anyway. I'm really happy with the growth. It's also putting on a lot of growth inside the actual structure of the plant as well. I think this is because of all the extra light those stems are getting. They're really starting to put out lots of little side shoots from deeper in within the plant, and that's giving it a really full appearance. I will have to keep an eye on some of these branches. I suspect they might start hanging down a bit with the weight of all the extra leaves, but hopefully that'll be offset with how stocky the plant has been grown in general. I've tried to keep it in high light levels its whole life, so hopefully it can support that extra weight of those leaves. But I'll just keep an eye on it. I have noticed these branches just sagged slightly in the last few days with the extra leaf growth, but I think with all the highlight levels it's under, that shouldn't be a problem, and it'll just kind of leaf up and stay nice and stocky. So that's my main plant anyway. If you guys don't know the history of it, basically I had a beautiful jade plant about this kind of size. It then got rot. I had to cut all the rot off, and I was only left with a tiny stump, and that was only about an inch high, and that's what this has resprouted from and given us this. But when I cut back the rotting branches, there was 2 large branches that didn't have any rot, and I rooted as cuttings. And these are those 2 large branches now. So they're looking really in quite a poor state of health. The reason being is they've been in the same pots now for I think about 6 or 7 years. So they need some new compost to refresh them. Also, they've been in the conservatory the whole time. So when the winter gets cold, it has been getting quite close to freezing at times for these plants. And they've dropped all their leaves most winters. So they've really struggled to green up again come the summertime. So they've really struggled quite a bit. So they need a little bit of attention. And that's what I'll be focusing on for the rest of this video. So as I say, these plants aren't looking too good at the moment. Another reason they're looking quite bare is I recently did a careers day. I work for a charity as part of my horticulture consultation work outside of YouTube, and as part of my workshop that I did for the careers day is the children were allowed to take their own cuttings and make some own plants of their own. So these have been kind of randomly chopped back in the last few weeks. You can see there's quite a bit of regrowth coming from where they've been cut, so they are responding well to the pruning. But what I need to do now is give them a really good proper prune, get them into a good shape, and then I want to refresh the compost because the compost has been left for so many years. It really needs some fresh compost added. So first of all, we'll have a look at this one, which is the one which is probably needing the least amount of work. So what I'll be doing with this, because it's summertime and I know this has been in quite a highlight environment and it's responding well to previous cuts, is I'm going to do quite a drastic prune. Ideally, I'd like the plant a little bit healthier than what it currently is. We're doing a drastic prune, but I think this can probably handle it and it should resprout okay. So what I wanted to do is really improve the structure of this plant. It's just kind of been left. It was well pruned by me probably about 5 years ago, but it hasn't been touched since. And then it had those random prunings about a month ago. So it's really needing some work done to it. So what I'm wanting to do is I want to take out this very low growth at the bottom here. I don't really need that. I'll just have the 2 stems. I'll take off these little seedlings that have come up. Well, they're not seedlings, what they are is they're leaves and stems that have fallen off and then regrown. So I'll take them off. Check there's not any rot or anything like that. I don't think there should be. Most of the branches do appear to be alive and healthy. And what I'm going to do is thin it out a little bit and take back a lot of these leggy stems. So you can see here we've got some very long leggy stems. If I was to leave this will just continue growing at long leggy growth. As the weight gets heavier, it will then flop down and it's just going to cause these kind of drooping branches. So what I want to do is cut it back to about here. What that will encourage is lots of side branches. You can see where these other ones have been cut, they're already showing some signs of new growth coming out. Basically, wherever you cut your jade plant, you'll get multiple new growths coming out. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this on all of the shoots. As I say, it's a very drastic prune. But what this will do is it will put the plant into shock and it will desperately try and regrow new shoots, but those new shoots are going to be coming out in multiple locations. So the rest of this doesn't look too bad. I think that's all the pruning I'll do for now. As I said, I don't want to go too hard because these are quite stressed plants. But that certainly improved the structure. And once that starts to grow out, I can probably start thinning some of these. This section is quite congested. The rest of it doesn't look too bad. So that's all for that one for now. This one though does need a lot more work done to it. Again, I will take out any little self-seeded cuttings that are in the base, cut off any growths that I don't want. I'm just keeping this down to a 3-stem plant. So I'll take them off. And then I'm just going to do a similar thing. So this one here, long growth, I've got to cut it back. But I don't want to cut it back right next to the base because I would like it to kind of branch from this section. If I have it branching back at the base, it's going to be quite congested in this area. So I'll cut it here. And when it comes to cutting jade plants, what you're wanting to do is you want to cut it in between the nodes. So you can see the nodes. The nodes are here. The nodes are basically where the leaves come out from, or they're the little lines, little line sections on the stem. You also want to cut it in between the lines, and basically everything above where you cut will fall off back to that line. So if I cut it here, for example, this is the base of the plant, so everything down, if I cut it off here, it will die off back to the next line, which is that section there. So it will just die back to there. If I cut it off and I cut it at the line like this, then that whole section will die off. If I cut it back where it's kind of closer to a line but just above a line, that's the ideal location, you'll just get a small bit die off and not a large bit. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead, just going to do a similar pruning, just going to get these long leggy growths taken out, encourage some more side branching, and if there's any congestion, there's quite a bit of congestion in the middle here, so I'm actually going to remove a couple of these branches, especially these ones that are growing in towards the middle. And the problem is this has been in the conservatory with the sun mainly on this side, so it's all growing this way. So you've got branches on this side of the plant growing across the middle of the plant to try and get to the other side. Ideally you want all the growth coming outwards, not all growing into each other. So there's a few shoots here, like these two for example, that I'm going to take out because they're kind of growing across the way that the plant is growing. So I'm just going to continue and I'm just going to prune out anything that looks like it needs pruned. This one, although it's got some nice branching at the top, it's a very long clear stem, so I'm going to prune that one to give it some branching. These ones are probably okay. There's a long clear stem here, but it's surrounded by lots of other branches lower down, so I don't mind that clear stem. And then it kind of has a decent branching structure at the top already, so I don't need to touch that. Looking at these ones, they're kind of growing away a bit, so I'm just going to trim them. Trim that one as well. And that should hopefully improve the appearance of the plant. And we'll get a lot more branching. So there we go. I think that's about as much as I'm going to do. It could potentially need a bit more hard pruning, but I'm happy enough with that for now. I'm just taking a couple of these lowest branches off now as well, so you can see the stems. So although this looks like 3 plants, it is actually 1 stem. But when I was rooting it, because it's so top heavy, I had to bury it quite deep. So the actual 3 do combine into 1 stem. So that's something I'm going to look at today. The same with this one here that has 2 stems. I'm going to see if I can reveal some of that original stem. I don't know if it's rotted off with it being buried, and I don't know how many of the roots that are rooted in from this cutting have come from higher up in the stem, or if they've come from the base of the stem. So we're going to find out. We're going to see how the root structure is when we refresh the compost. So I'll take this out. This is actually in the original cutting mix. I didn't realize I still had it in the cutting mix. That would explain why it's not growing very well. I had this in a cutting mix, so it's probably, it looks about 3/4 or more perlite, basically just almost pure perlite with a little tiny bit of compost for added moisture. So that's really good for getting the cutting to take root, and so it doesn't rot off. But it means that there's very little moisture retention in it and very little feed. So these plants have been growing almost like they're just growing in bare rock. They're just really struggling to grow. So I need a much richer mix now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to peel off as much as I can by hand. Because it is such a loose mix, a lot of this will just fall away completely loose. So I'm just going to go ahead there and see how much will come off without needing to use the secateurs. But I wanted to get most of it off. When it comes to refreshing compost on plants, normally you don't want to do much more than half, but when it comes to succulents, you can take off almost the entire root system and they'll just regrow as if it was a cutting. So I'm not too bothered about taking most of this off. So we'll have a look here as well. We'll see if we can find the original stem. Unfortunately, it looks like it has rooted from higher up, so I might not be able to expose much of the original stem. You can see here, you've got some quite substantial roots coming out from the main trunk high up. So it looks like we can't expose much of the original stem here, but we'll expose as much as we can because I think it'll make it a bit more of an interesting plant. As I say, we'll take off the vast majority of this old compost and expose the root system. And that's going to be much happier when we get a proper growing mix in it. And interestingly, at the very bottom, you can see there's the original stem. That's where it's calloused over, so it didn't rot off when I made the cutting. That's the original base of it. So because it's rooted from higher up, I can't expose that stem and have it more prominent. I might do that in the future, but that will take a little bit of work and I'll have to do it in stages. But that's that one exposed anyway. And we'll have a look at this one. I'm expecting it'll probably be similar. Lots of dry perlite, and then we probably won't be able to get all of the stem structure exposed. So there we go, that's most of the compost off, and it's very similar. You can see the original base of the main stem is there at the bottom, and then it's all kind of rooted at the top, so unfortunately we can't bring the root system any lower down to expose that stem structure, but that's fine. That's just how it's going to have to be. So what I'm going to do now is get these potted up into their new growing mediums. So I've made up a much richer mix. This is mostly based on my topsoil, so that's unfortunately why there's a bit of grass and there might be some roots as well, but this is most of my topsoil, which is well, it is now quite a rich sandy loam. It used to be a very poor sandy loam, but it's nice and free draining anyway, which is perfect for succulents. I put a little bit of fresh compost as well, just to make sure there's some nutrients and some moisture retention. And I've added probably about 1/3 perlite. So it doesn't look like it because often with loam compost, it sticks around the perlite, makes it dark, but there is somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of perlite. So it will be very free draining as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fill up the base of the pot with the compost. And what I will like to do in the future, I think, is get these some nicer pots, maybe even bonsai them. You guys let me know in the comments below what you'd like me to do with these plants. I haven't made a decision. Basically all I've done with these plants is I put them in these pots to make cuttings originally, and then I've just completely left them growing in the same cutting mix, which is why they've really not done well. So now with putting them in this new growing medium, it's going to grow really well. It's going to be a really healthy plant. And then you guys can let me know what you want me to do with it next, whether it's a bonsai or something else. Let me know what you want me to do with these plants. And when they're healthy in 6 months' time or so, I can then make another video and start potting them up and make something new from them. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fill it in with that new growing medium. Just going to try and get it potted in about the same height as previously. I really don't want it any deeper than before because I quite like to be able to see the stems. And it's never a good idea to bury stems on a succulent. Although they can root into the soil like these ones have, you do also have that risk that they could rot off. So I'm just going to have the bare minimum amount there just to cover it. If anything, it's slightly less deep than it was previously, but as I say, most of the roots are coming out the base. And it's also nice to expose some of the roots if I'm going for more of a bonsai effect as well. So that's the first one potted up, and I'll just do the second one in the exact same manner. So that's these two now planted up into the new growing medium. They should do much better. What I'll do is I'll put these under some time-lapse cameras and I'll show you how they grow and respond. I won't be able to get the whole growth on the time-lapse camera because they grow so slowly. It would take me months and months to get a long video, but I'll show you a very short clip hopefully to show you how they respond. They should hopefully green up really well and put on lots of side shoots. So when it comes to my jade plants, this one here, I've actually got somebody sponsored it on Patreon. You can also sponsor these two plants if any of you would like to sponsor a plant. When you sponsor a plant on Patreon, you basically pay a monthly fee and that will give you regular updates on your plant, with monthly updates with a description of how the plant's doing and also photos as well of how the plant's doing. So this one's already taken by somebody that have been for I think 5 years now, maybe a long time anyway. That's why I always look after this plant so well. Partly because it's a special plant for me, but also because somebody else has adopted it and they're always getting regular updates. So these two plants, as I say, it's on Patreon. YouTube membership doesn't really allow me to communicate individually, but Patreon does, so you can always sponsor a plant if you want, or any of my other plants that are on my videos. So that's all for this video. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. Do let me know if you have any ideas what you want me to do with these two plants. We'll see how they are in a few months' time, and I'll look at your suggestions and we'll make a decision on what to do with them.